The night the storm broke over the desert, Eli Carter believed it would be his last. The wind screamed across the open land like a wounded animal, tearing at the old wooden fence of his ranch and rattling the loose tin on his roof. Eli was poor. By every measure the world cared about, his cattle were few, his land half-dried by years of drought, his clothes patched more times than he could remember. But he was rich in one thing. He refused to turn his back on suffering, no matter whose it was. That stubborn kindness was about to change his life forever. Eli had been mending a fence by lantern light when he saw them. At first, he thought the shadows moving through the rain were tricks of exhaustion. Then lightning split the sky, and he froze. Two enormous figures staggered toward his land, each nearly a head taller than any person he had ever seen. Their long, dark hair was soaked and clung to their shoulders, their clothes torn and heavy with mud. Even wounded and barely standing, they moved with a strange dignity. Apache women giants, by any measure, leaning on each other to stay upright. Every story Eli had grown up hearing warned him to keep his distance. Giants were dangerous. Apache warriors were unforgiving. A poor rancher alone at night would be foolish to get involved. Eli knew all that. He also knew the look of pain when he saw it. One of the women collapsed to her knees, clutching her side where blood mixed with rain. The other tried to lift her and failed, letting out a low, broken cry that cut through the storm more sharply than thunder. Eli did not think. He dropped the lantern and ran. Getting them to the barn nearly killed him. Each step was a battle, mud sucking at his boots, his muscles screaming as he wedged his shoulder under an arm thick as a tree limb. The injured sister, later he would learn her name, was Naya, burned with fever, her breathing shallow and ragged. The other, Asha, watched Eli with fierce, wary eyes, ready to strike if he betrayed them. Yet she allowed him to help, and that alone told Eli how desperate their situation was. Inside the barn, he laid them on fresh hay and tore his last clean shirt into strips for bandages. He boiled water over a small fire, ignoring the pain in his hands, and cleaned the wound as best he could. The cut was deep, likely from a blade meant to kill. Whoever had attacked them had not expected them to survive. Eli worked through the night, guided by instinct and compassion rather than skill, whispering calm words, even though he wasn't sure they understood his language. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean and quiet. Naya still lived, but just barely. Asha finally spoke then, her voice low and heavy with exhaustion. She thanked him not with flowery words, but with a simple nod that carried the weight of a promise. "Our people will know what you have done," she said. Those words should have frightened him. Instead, they filled him with a strange peace. The days that followed were some of the hardest Eli had ever known. He fed the sisters with what little food he had, giving them his own portions when supplies ran low. He sold a calf the last could spare to buy medicine from a traveling trader, swallowing the fear that he might not survive the winter without it. At night, he slept lightly, listening to Naya's breathing, afraid that if he closed his eyes too long, she would be gone. Slowly, impossibly, she recovered. When Naya finally stood on her own, sunlight pouring through the barn doors, Eli felt tears sting his eyes. She was enormous, yes, but there was gentleness in her smile, strength tempered by gratitude. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head. In that moment, Eli understood that kindness once given never truly disappears. It echoes. The sisters did not leave immediately. Naya needed more strength, and Asha insisted on helping. Around the ranch in return, watching a giant woman repair fences faster than any man Eli had ever known was something the neighbors would have laughed at if they had known. But the ranch was isolated, and the secret remained between them. Then, one morning, the ground itself seemed to tremble. Eli stepped outside and saw dust rising on the horizon. Horses, dozens of them. As they drew closer, his stomach tightened. Apache warriors, tall and broad, their presence commanding silence from the land itself. At their center rode a figure even larger than the sisters, his posture straight, despite his age, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. The chief Eli knew, in that instant, that his life stood at a crossroads. He did not run. He did not reach for a weapon. He stood where he was, hands empty, heart pounding, ready to accept whatever came. The chief dismounted and walked toward him, each step deliberate. Asha and Naya came out of the barn and stood behind. Eli not as shields, but as witnesses. The chief spoke slowly, his voice deep and calm. He said his daughters had been attacked by men who feared their strength and sought to prove their own. He said many would have left them to die, especially a man with so little to gain. Then he fell silent. Eli waited for judgment. Instead, the chief made a decision that shocked everyone present. He knelt. A murmur rippled through the warriors. A chief did not kneel lightly, and never before an outsider. He bowed his head and spoke words of honor, declaring that Eli Carter, poor rancher of dry land and broken fences, had shown a wealth of spirit greater than gold. He said a man who saves life at the cost of his own comfort is no enemy of the Apache. He is family. The decision went further. The chief offered Eli protection, trade, and shared land rights between the ranch and Apache territory. Water access, grazing support, and aid during harsh seasons. In return, Eli would remain what he already was, a man of peace, a bridge between worlds that had too often known only fear. Eli could barely speak. He accepted with a trembling voice, not because of what he gained, but because of what it meant. Trust, respect, a future not built on blood. In the months that followed, Eliza's ranch changed. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily. Apache traders came with supplies. Warriors helped reinforce wells. Eli shared his land during droughts, and the tribe shared their strength during storms. Stories spread, not of giants to be feared, but of people to be understood. Years later, travelers would speak of a place where a poor rancher once stood against fear and chose compassion instead. They would tell of two giant sisters who survived because one man refused to look away. And they would speak of a chief's shocking decision not as a moment of weakness, but as an act of wisdom. Because the greatest strength, as Eli Carter learned, is not found in size, weapons, or wealth. It is found in the courage to help when the world expects you to turn your back into the understanding that even the poorest hands can change the course of many lives.